Do you start your week listening to the business side of music? Well, I do. This is George from South Africa, and I tell you what, these guys really know what they are talking about.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
This is Bob Ender, and you're listening to this edition of the business side of music. On this episode, we have, I'm going to call him a friend of mine. I've known him for, probably 13, 14 years. It was interesting how we met. I had an office in the Marathon Motorworks building here in Nashville. He had a studio right below us. And one day, there's this guitar riff just being played over and over and over and over. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? And I go downstairs and I knock on the door and I meet Bobby Blazier. And it's gone either uphill or downhill from there. I'm not sure. Bobby, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for asking.
Hey, so, we have a lot of different guests on the show, a lot of different expertise. Yours, we could go either way with this. You're a drummer and have played with some pretty amazing people that I want to talk about. You're also a record producer, which is how I met you. The business has changed quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about you first. So where'd you get your start?
Oh, my gosh. I grew up in church. My dad's a preacher, so I grew up Pentecostal, Southern, so music was everywhere.
Right.
And he used to go to radio stations when I was a little kid, and I'd follow him in there. And I would hear the music coming out of speakers, and I knew the musicians had to be around here somewhere, so I'd just go looking for the musicians. I didn't get that it was on a little, it was like I was too young. I was like, come on, there's got to be musicians. So my fascination with music started really early, and then I started playing on stage, and then...
So when you started playing, what were you playing?
Playing guitar.
Playing guitar.
Yeah. And then...
Because that's where we all start.
Oh, absolutely. And then my parents they knew I was going to be a drummer. They just knew I was at an early age. But I took guitar lessons, and I took piano lessons. I did all. And then they finally went and got me my drum set when I was 12 years old. And it was a duck to water. I mean, it was like, okay, this is... And they knew they were in trouble at that point. And
you had that natural ability to
I did.
kick, snare, hi-hat.
Somebody that had come to my dad's church. They had a big group and had a drum set, and they left it there for like 2 or 3 days. And I snuck in there and started playing it, and they heard me. And they were asking, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" And I said, "I just know how to do it. It just came natural to me to do it." So, and I loved it. It's one of those things too that you probably don't develop like you should because you have this ability just to do it. Like
right.
I took drum lessons and teachers and stuff, and I could go in and play whatever they want me to play, and they're like, well, so it was a little frustrating from that standpoint that that I wanted it to really get into the meat and that. They were like, you can play this, so I played that, and but anyway, so my fascination with it was just really young, and then my dad was working, kind of co-managing a group, a Christian group at that time. They ended up being more country, but he was managing them, and they had a drummer who was a great drummer named Danny Peak, and he was from out west, and he was just an amazing drummer. And I learned so much from him. He was very technical, very emotional, and when he quit, they needed a drummer, and I was kind of thrown into it, so to speak, and it evolved from that. Then I went on to play with them, and we ended up moving to Texas, and I got real involved there with the Texas scene, and it was back in the Stevie Ray Vaughan days, and there was record companies there, and it was amazing. It was amazing to be there. It was 1980. Record companies actually had offices there, and Luke Lewis was there.
Oh, wow,
there.
Yeah. Who wound up in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who ended up being the president of Polygram. It was back in the Dallas days, and it was a hodgepodge of this really eclectic kind of place to be. It wasn't Nashville, it wasn't California. It was like there was Janie Fricke, and then there would be Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then there would be Christopher Cross came out of there, and Boss Skaggs came out of there, and it was just Axl Rose came out of there. It was just all this blues and country and rock, and it was just amazing what was happening, during that period. So it evolved. We started working with a guy in Nashville named James Stroud, who became a friend. Eventually, he said, "You need to be here." There was the guys that we were using on the records during that time kept saying, "You need to come. You need to be here." And so after I left the group in '87, I moved here. Hindsight's always 20/20. I wish I'd have done it when I was 20.
Yeah,
it's such an amazing. It wasn't never to me making music has never. I mean, you always want to make a living and make money at what you're doing. But I never came here to get rich or anything. I wanted to come here and be around musicians and be around songwriters and be around engineers and great studios and breathe that and absorb that. And it was all fascinating. I remember when I first moved here, a friend of mine, Brett Owens, a really great guitar player, session player, and he was kind enough to take me on sessions. And it was just to be sitting in the room with David Hungate and Larry London and all these amazing musicians. I was in heaven. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, for getting to observe this and see this. It was back when you put 9 guys in a room and they'd make music together, and it was to watch that chemistry and to watch, Reggie Young and Brent and all these guys just take a song and craft it. One of the sessions was Dolly Parton session, and she was there, and to watch the interaction between the artist, songwriter, and the musicians and how they molded that was, I was in awe. I never got tired of it. I would stay as long as they would allow me to be in the room. I mean, and to me, that's where I learned and watched and observed these guys.
And you can go to school, you can take all the courses you want, either online or in the classroom, but spending that time in the studio, just perfecting those chops, I mean, that's what it comes down to.
It did, and of course, I didn't go to school for it back, when I was.
Well, there weren't schools around there,
There were no schools.
Yeah.
So Belmont College was maybe the only one that was even remotely starting to do stuff with songwriters and artists and stuff. But I came from Texas back here to Tennessee, and I remember North Texas. They were strictly just a jazz music school. Now they've evolved to teaching songwriting and the number system and all this other stuff that they've evolved into, which I think in today's society, in today's music, you have to have all of it. You've got to be so well rounded. But when I came here, the way to learn was to watch and observe and be part of it. And I had I was in Dallas working there, and there was really good studios there. But it wasn't Nashville, and it wasn't those players.
Right.
And it wasn't, somebody pushing you to the next level and going, come on, you got to get better than this. You got to, come on,
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that I say to people, who say, hey, I'm a guitar player, I'm a bass player, or keyboard player, drummer, I want to further my career, and I live in such and such city. And I tell them, look, move to Nashville or move to LA or move to New York. Surround yourself with people, especially those who have the chops, because there's nothing so amazing yet so humbling as to work with these cats in the studio. I know when I started getting in the field of producing, I had some great opportunities. Like I sit in the same room with Chuck Howard, to just I'd watch him as he'd go through a session of testing 10 or 12 different vocal mics for one singer.
Yeah.
And you start to learn, it trains your ear, but you can't capture that, living in wherever. You've got to be surrounded. And so I say this to a lot of people, that Nashville, especially, the talent pool of artistry here is so deep that it really forces you, it regulates you, and forces you to improve your chops.
It does. It's the old saying, iron sharpens iron, and it is really, really true. And if you're here and you want to be a great songwriter, then hang out with great songwriters.
Yeah.
Yes, it's intimidating, but the only way you're going to learn is just to be around it.
But you know what? Those same songwriters, that's how they started out. Most
well,
of
it is.
them.
And most, and that's the other massive thing that I love about Nashville, and I'm going to, as much as I hate how big it's getting now and the traffic and all that, the number one thing that makes Nashville great and makes the music industry great in this town is its people. They are humble, they're kind, they're great at their craft, they are willing to share it with anybody, anywhere.
What you've just done is increase the population of musicians coming to town.
I know. I tell a quick story. This girl that I'm working with, violin player, we went into a place to have breakfast. And I knew this place where we had breakfast. I go in quite often, and Vince Gill's always there. And I didn't even say anything to her. I knew that he was in Louisville the night before with the Eagles, and I didn't even think that he would even possibly be there because it was relatively early.
Right.
And so we walk in, and she's behind me, and I hear my name called, and sure enough, I look up, and it's Vince. And I hear her over my shoulder go, "Oh my God, it's Vince Gill." We walk over to him, and he hugs me and pushes me all the way because Susan's a beautiful woman, and he hugs her. He was with another friend there, Joe, that I knew, so we were talking, and Vince sat and talked to Susan for like 15 minutes.
Had just met her.
Just met her. And we walked away, and she said, "I cannot believe he spent 15 minutes with me just asking me about me, wanting to know." And I said, that's the sign of a mature musician and and he really cares. And I said, in a year from now, if you run into him again, he's going to remember you, trust me. I said, that's the kind of people that are in this town, like the Dolly Partons, like the Alison Krauses. You know, they're genuinely kind people, you know, and they're very humble people with their time and their gifts. And it's just, that's the thing that I love about being here. It's always been that way to me. It's always been that way, you know.
This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, Julie Rust here with another Audible Insight. Okay, you might think this is crazy, but I have a friend who sometimes fixes things just by turning them on and off. He told me that everything is energy, which I already believe, and energy has a memory, a pattern that it gives off when it's working perfectly. You just have to remind the machine, energy, of its original purpose. Remind it of when it worked perfectly. I tried it with my washing machine that was acting weird. The cycles weren't running properly. I put my hand on it for 10 to 15 seconds and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for running so well and making my life so much easier." It was my interpretation of, reminding it of its perfect purpose. Well, it took a couple of weeks, but it runs fine now. And that was over a year ago. Pretty cool, huh? My van was also leaking oil. I told it, "Thank you for being a perfect van every time I started it up." Guess what? It doesn't leak oil anymore. Think you can give it a try? This is Julie Rust. To hear more Audible Insights or listen to my music, visit me on the web at julierust.com.
Fame Music Radio, serving up a potpourri of independent music to every nook and cranny throughout the internet universe. From Roku TV to TuneIn, the world is listening. FameMusicRadio.com.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
This is Bob Bender. You're listening to The Business Side of Music. We're in the studio today with friend, drummer, and producer, Bobby Blazier. Bobby, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
I think, we were talking about before the break how approachable some of these artists are. Most of them are. I know that living in the Hendersonville area where I did for so many years, I'd be in Kroger and there'd be Ricky Skaggs in the aisle, there'd be Marty Stewart or one of the Oak Ridge Boys or Lori Morgan, whoever. And, that's the thing. They're just regular folk. You know, a lot of people see them on stage and think they're superstars, and they are in their own right. But, you know, they're just normal folk, and they are. They're just genuine, and they're friendly, and they'll say hi to you. You know, I commute back and forth between Los Angeles and Nashville, and it's two different animals entirely.
It's way two different animals.
And the one thing I don't like about Nashville about Los Angeles is it's so isolating, and you know you don't have that rapport going on. You know, I walk into the restaurants here in Nashville, and the server will call me sweetie. You know,
exactly.
You know? and that's
or honey.
Or honey.
Hey,
yeah. I called my wife this morning and I said, hey, I just can't get over the fact that the waitress calls me sweetie when I come in, and that's just how people are here.
Well, it is true, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, granted, when all of this started in Nashville back in the 50s, it was a small town, and it was really relatively a small town up until mid-80s, you know, and stuff. The area was not that big, you know, it was just, everybody knew. I mean, there was, on Music Row, there were 5 or 6 places that you would go get lunch, so you ran into everybody there, and you would see everybody knew what was going on in every studio, and it was that kind of, in LA, it's not that way. If you talk to any of the people that moved there, you know, it's like, you didn't do a 10 at one place and a 2 at another, and you just didn't do it. It just didn't work out that way, because there was no way to physically get there, because it's an hour.
Yeah, you might have one session.
Day.
Yeah, you might have a session in the Valley, and then you'd have a session in downtown Hollywood, and another one in Burbank. Yeah, you're right. Just traffic would prevent
it could be
that.
an hour to 4 hours, depending on the traffic day.
Yeah. You know, and I first came to Nashville in 1987. I came here on a tour, and got to go down Demumbrian Street back then, and of course you had
the Shoney's.
With the Shoney's, and the restaurant and the hotel, and that right next to that was Reba McEntire's museum, and across the road was Hank Williams Jr. and George Jones. Of course, those are all gone, and Music Row for the most part is gone. But you know, like where we're at today in this facility, you know, this is kind of becoming the new music hub. We're right across the street from the Gibson guitar plant, and you know, it's just, there's a lot of coming and going in the music business, but the one thing is music's eternal. People always want it, and so we just, you know, we have to create new ways. We talk about that a lot in the podcast, but you know, we still have to network, and so, you know, I think it's important that we all always socialize and reach out to people and talk to them. I want to talk a little bit about producing. So one of the things that we discuss so much these days is, especially with Vinny, we talk about independent artists, because that's who we work with. You know, the label roster isn't what it used to be. The label artist or act isn't what it used to be. A lot of it's independent artists, and we tell them that, you know, you don't necessarily need that record deal. We really preach that a lot to be successful. You, as a record producer who have worked with some amazing people, you and I really connected with Michael Martin Murphey, because I worked with Murph for a while, and you were producing and playing drums for him. And I remember Murph had his own record label. West Records, which you know, I had the opportunity to work at for a while. That really opened my eyes a lot to, you know, if back then, when you're still trying to sell CDs, as long as you have some distribution in place, and you can create some radio, you could have a record label. Well, now, you know, if you're an artist that's on Spotify or Pandora or YouTube and have a good Facebook following, you've really kind of in your own dynamic created your own record label. How does that work for the record producer day? Because now what's happened is the artist has kind of become their own one-stop shop. They can write their music or work with fellow songwriters. How do you explain to them that they still need a record producer?
It's an interesting time, because going back to the original thought here is, I don't know anybody. I mean, I can't name any of my friends that have gotten a record deal lately on a major label. So everything is kind of leaning toward indie, maybe distribution through a major or that kind of thing. And it's kind of a great thing, because if you want to have if you're a true artist, when I say true artist, I mean, like, you write, you play, you've got a vision for where, you know, I call it the Bruce Springsteen syndrome. He knew exactly who he was, what he wanted to do, and where he was going. He may not have known how to exactly get there
Right.
on his own, but he knew, and he kept that image of himself. And I love that about people. James Taylor did the same thing. Most great artists have that vision of themselves, and they hang on to it. They're not a star. They don't want to be a star. They want to be an artist. They're going to write and play until you can create your own thing. You have outlets now to get your CDs out and get your music out and to travel and it's whatever. It's kind of you're really your own self-made person at this point, because you are creating your own world, your own record company, your own vision. Now, sometimes I do know that majors do come to you after a while and want to work with you because you have done so well. That's happened to a couple artists that I've worked with. We did it independently. It took off, and next thing you know, they come knocking, and that's a good thing. But also, what's a great thing is you don't have to sell. If you're an independent artist and you do a small record on a small budget, you don't have to sell 100,000 records or 1 million records anymore. You sell 5,000 or 10,000 records, you're making money.
You're making money, and then that in turn helps get you out on the road.
Exactly.
And which it kind of becomes a snowball effect. You're out on the road and you're performing and you're selling product. It's just increasing. We talk about Bruce Springsteen. I know that Jimmy Iovine with his record, like with Interscope. He went into the studio with Springsteen, I think, on the first album, and just kind of let him flow and experiment a little bit, because Jimmy knew what he needed to pull out of Bruce, but he needed to Bruce to showcase it. So and I think that's a lot when you're in the studio producing. You're really kind of I don't know if the mentor is the right word, but you're there to really kind of coach. You're the coach.
Yeah.
You're the cheerleading section for that musician in the studio, especially for someone who has not been in the studio before.
I call the producer the daddy of the whole project because it is his guidance, his knowledge, his wisdom. But at the end of the day, the kid is going to make his own decision up on what he wants it to be and what I want to grow up to be.
Yeah.
And I always tell all the artists I work with, I said, this is not my record. This is your record. My deal is to make it the best record for you that it can possibly be. How can I do that? How can I surround you with, if you don't write songs, musicians, studios, give you the best opportunity to bring what you have. But this is not my record. So you have as much input as me. Now I'm going to guide you in ways and push you in ways. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy with it, because this is your life.
You just brought up something so vitally important. I worked in the studio some years ago with an artist who didn't write, so we had to go out and find songs. I think we found 60, 70 songs to narrow it down to 10. And then, I asked this artist, what are you looking for? What style? In this kind of a traditional country. So sorry, so we'll make sure I have a pedal steel player, and we'll have a fiddle player, and great background vocalist. We spent weeks in the studio, an amazing voice, projects, and that artist is sitting in the studio every day. Everything that we're doing, every move that we make, this artist is involved in, just like what you talked about. At the end of the day, the album's done, and it's out there, and it gets some radio play, and it does okay. 6 months later, a year later, this artist is asked by another country artist, did you like your album? Well, not really. Well, as a producer, when you hear that, you go, that's something that should have been determined in the studio, because once it's out there, it's out there. You can't retrieve it back. Yeah. So that's, the producer can only pull so much from the artist. The artist is ultimately responsible for what goes on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just worked with this pop kid from Florida, and the same thing. He's 22, 23 years old. Amazingly talented kid. Crazy talent. Plays everything ridiculously well. And wrote all these songs, and we got into the project, and it morphed into him really taking the ball and running with it. And because he was in Florida and I was here, it just kind of lended itself more to him doing stuff down there. And he called me one day.
So were you doing this long distance?
We came up here and worked at Jonathan Cain's studio. And then we tracked a couple other days, but he wanted to work on some of it down there. I said, totally fine. So he kept working on it and kept working on it and kept working on it. And finally, after a while, I was like, you need to take this and do it yourself. I said, you're the artist. You've got the vision.
Right.
You can do this. And he's like, no, I can't. He goes, I really need you. I goes, no, you don't. I said, call me. I'll give you advice, but you take this. Because there's, every once in a while you have somebody like that.
You do.
Is just uber talented, like off the charts.
And wants to micro-produce so much.
Wants to micro-produce it so much anyway, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and do it. And I can help you. I mean, I'm more than willing to help
At that
you.
point, you become more of a cheerleader than you do that daddy.
You become the executive producer.
Right.
At that point,
Yeah.
you become the executive, and you just kind of like make sure everything's still going, everything's moving along, and it's so that way. But there's a million ways you could go about making a record anymore. I mean, back when we grew up, there was one way. You went into a studio with a tape machine of musicians.
And 4 tracks or 8 tracks or 16.
16.
I'm dating myself, but
Yeah,
when
me
I
too.
started, it was 4 tracks.
Yeah, I think the first studio I ever went into when I was really, really young was, I think it was 8 tracks.
Yeah.
I think that's all we had. And all the walls were carpeted. And
We had eggshell cartons on the one I went into. This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to the business side of music. Next up, the Indie Artist Spotlight, brought to you by Reverb Nation.
Hi, this is Spencer.
And Sequoia.
And we are Spencer and Sequoia. We are 2 singer-songwriters that collaborate and harmonize to achieve a chill, jazzy pop sound that you can hear on our latest single, Best Thing, available on Reverb Nation.
The stars are looking like the moon sprinkled through the sky, and the sky itself, it looks pretty fine, and the clouds are full, even though it's still night time. The birds are singing, make the sounds look pretty, and I see reflects this big city, and the lights made by men will never outshine your room. My memories are always, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Come to my heart, you know everything, and I want to know all about you. Ooh, no, you're everything that I'll ever need, even when life gets so frivolously complicated. They say they'll never see the wind, but leaves dance, oh, they spin with that wind. So can't you see it, They say that they'll never see you, but they'll always look outside their windows, not a picture painted by the fingers of a man, 'cause it can never stand for you. Oh, you know you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Come to my heart, you know everything, and I want to know all about you. Oh, no. Oh, no, you're everything that I'll ever need, even when life gets so frivolously complied. Keep telling now. Oh,
We are Spencer and Sequoia, and we're members of Reverb Nation.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Bob Ender. We're back with Bobby Blazier here in the studio. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music here in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, I think finding artists, you know, that's the future of this business. You know, my wife loves to watch Dancing with the Stars, and she goes, God, there's this amazing dancer on there by the name of Lindsay Sterling. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, you know, she goes, well, I don't know who she is. And I said, go to YouTube.
Yeah, she's a dancer that plays violin.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's an expressionist.
Yeah.
You know, musician. Pentatonics is the same way. There's all these groups that are amazing artists, musicians, that are being discovered on anything but radio.
Exactly. That's how today's people, you know, the people are finding them out about these artists, and it's an amazing way to do it.
It is. It's
incredible.
Yeah. Where do you see the role of the producer? I had Rick Lloyd on some episodes back, and we talked about the future of the recording studio. And you know, it's when you and I started, you know, we had racks and racks of gear. Now everything is a plug-in that, you know, you put on Pro Tools.
Carrying a suitcase or a little pack along.
Yeah, and you know what? In many cases, it's almost just as good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But the role of the producer, do you feel like it's becoming a little more interactive? You're getting a little more involved than just being a producer?
Yeah, definitely artists, when they come to you now, you are not only the producer, but you're the advisor, and you're the manager, and you're the marketer.
And the hand holder.
And the hand holder, and you know, it's incredible, you know, the things that you have to do. Absolutely.
You learn that
Absolutely.
stuff, yeah.
So you have to, you know, I said, in my world, you have to adapt to just about everything, you know, how to be mommy, how to be daddy, how to be, you know, because the artists that we're working with, it's emotional. It's so emotional.
Oh, and, boy.
Especially when it comes from that place of pain. I was watching, there's a great documentary on Access Channel on Imagine, John Lennon. And so, you know, you follow the Beatles, but there were so many things that I didn't know about John, and his mom and dad basically, his dad left, and then his mom left to go find work, and he was raised by his aunt. And then when he was about 16 or 17, his mom kind of came back into his life. And they were just starting to get together when she was hit by an off-duty cop that was drunk and killed her.
Oh, my gosh.
Right when he got to know, right when he's starting to know her. And the songs show that, and I'm pretty sure that George Martin had a lot to do with those emotions and them coming out and being willing to talk, you know, able to talk to him and stuff. And I'm like, when you're an artist, a true artist like that, your emotions are all over the map. I mean, people are anyway, but artists just seem to have that emotion that just kind of will skyrocket and then nosedive like a plane going down in flames, you know. There's hardly any level ground for them. It's just, you know, it's one or the other. And so you have to learn to be all those things. You have to learn to be daddy, producer, and you know, especially in today's world, to me, because I'm working with a country girl. I'm working with a kind of a Christian artist, rock guy. I'm working with this pop kid from Florida and Susan. And I mean, it's all over the map. You have to adapt anymore to be in this industry anymore.
Well, and that's the other thing too, because music has become more universal. It's more of a world-wide phenomenon now. You're not, you know, for the most part, because of YouTube and other platforms, you're not just going to break in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Denver, Colorado. You have the opportunity to reach a universal market. I know on the podcast, we just got a response from someone in Ireland, you know, listening to the podcast, and I told Vinny, I said, man, that's so cool. You know, we're overseas now. I think that, you know, you're right in working with all these different genres and styles. You have to be able to adapt, because sooner or later those are all going to kind of come together in a project anyway.
Exactly.
One project that I think was a little different, at least, you know, from the standpoint, was Michael Martin Murphey.
Yeah.
And boy, you talk about a traditionalist, and you and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't call Michael Martin Murphey a country artist because he's a cowboy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to call Murphy anymore.
Yeah.
He when I got introduced to Murphy, it was his first record, which was Geronimo's Cadillac, and it was this country rock. You know, it was what was going on in the '70s. It was kind of Eagle-ish, you know, so to speak. You know, it was Jackson Browne and James Taylor. All those guys kind of had that singer-songwriter thing, and Murphy was definitely coming. I mean, he lived on the West Coast for a while, but he's a Texas boy. And then, you know, he went through his period where it was country. You know, he came and he was.
But Wildfire wasn't a country song.
No,
I mean, that was being played on pop radio.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So he's kind of covered the spectrum of everything. I mean, he really. I mean, his. We got a Grammy nomination 4 years ago, and it was for a bluegrass record. Go figure, you know. But he's kind of.
Well, he is the personification of a cowboy. When you meet him, I mean, it's the real deal, you know.
Deal. It's
and,
absolutely.
You know, that hat and bandana and boots that he's wearing, that's not a gimmick. That's him. He's out. In fact, I remember we were. I was on the phone with his agent one day. We were we were putting Murphy on the late night show with David Letterman.
Yeah.
And and of course, Murph doesn't fly. You know, he's one of those guys that drives. And I remember saying to Murph, you know, hey, we're going to get this all put together and get it set up, and I'll call you in a week or so to give you all the details. And he said, Bob, I'm going to be on a cattle drive. And I said, well, just take your cell phone with you. He goes, where I'm going, there ain't no cell towers, Bob. You know, and that's just kind of him. It's the real deal.
And he's still that way. He lives up in the corner, northwest corner of Colorado, where Colorado meets Wyoming. He lives up there on some property that some guy. It's like 70,000 acres.
Yeah.
I think it's like 10,000 feet year round. He lives up there, and it's cold all the time.
And he loves it.
He loves it.
Yeah.
He's crazy about it.
Yeah.
If it gets below 60 to me, I'm miserable, you know. But for him, he loves it.
Now, you're still playing with him?
I play on the records. You know, I'll go out every once in a while and do a show with him. But, you know, I get to see him. I may get to see him on this Christmas tour that he's got now. He wants me to come out and play one show with him, so I may do that.
Right. And he does that every year.
He does a Christmas tour. This was the 21st year of the Christmas tour, I think, something like that. So he's done it for quite a while now, which was, you know, really helped by Warner Western. You know, that whole thing kicked off.
Yeah.
When Jim Ed started that really helped kick off this Christmas tour thing. So,
what's next for Bobby Blazier?
There's a couple of Irish artists that or English artists that I'm really excited about. That I'm hoping that we get in the studio really soon. And there's two twins over there named Ward Thomas that we produced, that Chris Rodriguez and I produced, and they ended up getting signed to Sony, and they're doing amazingly well over there. And there's two other twins that have contacted me, which is so bizarre that I'm twins from England. Go figure. I didn't know there were two sets of twins in England, but in all of England. Somehow
I'm sure we're going to hear from the twin audience in the United Kingdom on that one.
Sorry, no disrespect. But they want to come over and cut some stuff. And so I have this connection with English artists that of course, I could move over there. I love it over there.
Yeah.
I love the people there. I have so many English friends that live in Nashville, you know, so it's great. But
Well, don't do that because we want you here.
No, but it's Murphy. We're fixing to do a new Murphy record, and I think it's hopefully it will be. We haven't really got to spend a lot of time on Murphy records like we need to for him. This one, I think we're going to get to spend a lot of time on and do a really proper record with him and really nitpick the songs and really do a really great job for him.
You're going to record that here in Nashville?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm not stuck here, but I'm happily stuck here.
Yeah.
You know, I love it here.
Where are you doing your recording these days?
I have a small studio at the house that mainly actually my engineer Jeremy Hunter.
Right. Who you've been with for years.
For years. And Jeremy has kind of, he does his thing. He's mixed Taylor Swift and my gosh, he's done everybody lately. It's crazy. So he kind of keeps his thing going there.
Yeah.
Jill Scott, and I mean, it's just bombarding of who he's worked with. But mainly when I track and I go do vocals and stuff, I go to the tracking room. I'll go there and work it. I love the place. I love the mics. Kenny Chesney's company owns it now, Morrison Sound. They own it now. I'll either work there or I'll work at Sound Emporium. And that's my,
We still have some great studios in this town.
Oh my gosh. And it's crazy, the studios that Blackbird, is crazy. Jonathan Cain from Journey, he built a studio mainly for himself, but he lets a few people that he knows work in there. I went in there just to see it. I was like, oh my Lord, this is unbelievable that this is in Nashville. I mean, it's like state of the art on steroids, and nobody knows it's there.
Yeah.
And he lets a few people go in, and I've worked in here 2 or 3 times, but I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just lovely.
It's one of those private studios off the radar that you just love. I know a few years ago I had the opportunity to work in Korn's studio out in Bakersfield. It's the old Buck Owens studio.
Yeah.
But Korn redone, to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Just like they poured like 2,000 pounds of sand in the control room floor, just because Jonathan wanted it, that dead.
Yeah.
What these guys did was great, and to be able to work in there and have kind of that. That was a really kind of a contradiction of terms, because you're looking in the tracking room and you're going, that's where Buck Owens recorded. and then you're in the control room and you're going, this is where Jonathan Davis records.
Exactly.
But
wait a minute, what's wrong with this?
Yeah, but it's cool. It balances itself out. But yeah, those private studios, if you can find them,
it
are
does.
great.
They have the House of Blues studios here now, which is incredible. It's lovely. Gary Bales came in, who owns the House of Blues with Dan Aykroyd, and so he's made an investment back here again, and the rooms are amazing. Each one of them is so different, and it represents somewhere different. Like I think D, or the one across the street, looks like a Memphis studio that they've literally moved the whole building to Nashville, set it down over there, and kept it. He's very creative. He's very open. Gary's one of those guys that we're lucky that is in Nashville, because he's really an amazing guy to have. He gets the vision of the creative person and making music and how crazy the environments are, and he gets all that. And those are the kind of people that we need to have that kind of vision in this town. The open studios like that.
And I think that's something that Nashville will always be good at having. It's just those great studios.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we still have Ocean Way, which is amazing. That it's one of the few studios on music.
Yeah, that Mike Herb took over and really kind of revitalized.
Yeah. John McBride, Martina made an amazing investment in Berry Hill with Blackbird, and there's 5 or 6 rooms over there at least.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of the old studios that are still over there, like Treasure Isle, and there's all those places over there. So Berry Hill's kind of become the music grow in some ways, and a lot of people have put studios in their house because they can anymore.
They can. And I think that's the other thing, too, that people need to realize is that Nashville is not just country music, or it's just not gospel music.
No.
It's, when you have, you could be sitting at a restaurant and look over and there's one of the guys from Kings of Leon, or there's somebody from Metallica, or, there's an influx of different styles of music coming into this town.
And it's funny because when I moved here, of course, I was really young, I always envisioned in my mind that it was country and Christian music that was here. But if you do your homework and you find out, when the Everlys were recording here, they were considered pop. So was Orbison, so was Cash. You know, Conway Twitty was considered rock and roll. And then it rolled into the Bob Dylans. And then I remember it rolled into Kansas recording here. And then it just kept on going. And people have always, I remember one of the first years I moved here, or second year I was here, a buddy of mine was going out to Franklin. And he said, yeah, I'm going out to the studio out there. And I said, out in Franklin? He goes, yeah. He goes, it's on a farm out that the guys from Motley Crue built a studio out there. And they secretly come here and go out there and make music and write and stuff. And I thought, that's the wildest thing I have ever. It's crazy.
Because nobody's going to bother them.
Nobody's going to bother them.
You know,
they were incognito.
Yeah.
They could do whatever they wanted to. And I remember Whitney Houston doing that. Whitney Houston used to sneak in the town of Mariah Carey. And then I started finding out producers that I knew were working with them, and they would it just became more and more. And now it's kind of commonplace. You know, you had the Foo Fighters recording here all the time, and Aerosmith's here. You know, Steven Tyler has a place here, and you know, Robert Plant. You know,
Richard Marx.
Richard Marx is here. You know, Cynthia, his wife, is from here, and it's just kind of the influx of people here is crazy, crazy. You know,
it's definitely a musical mecca.
It is a musical mecca, and that's what makes it really great. It's just there's so much creativity here. Now the city's kind of caught more of you know what's going on around the rest of the world, and growing in those ways. But there's even more art coming here, and more more of that creativity, which is encouraging to see too.
If you pull out the Nashville Scene magazine and just look at the upcoming calendar of acts, we definitely, we've got a full roster of talent coming through this town.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Bobby, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. How can people find you?
My Facebook page.
Okay.
That's where I am. That's pretty much where I am all the time.
Good. Or they can email us here.
Absolutely.
And we can forward on the information. Bobby, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
All right. If you're interested in learning more about our show, drop us a line at musicpodcast@mail.com. That's musicpodcast@mail.com. If you have any suggestions of persons or topics that involve the music industry you'd like to hear about on our podcast, please feel free to let us know. You can follow us on Facebook on the Business Side of Music podcast page. You can also find us on Twitter at Music Business Podcast. Also, if you're listening to this podcast through iTunes, post a review on what you think of our show. This is Bob Bender, and you've been listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender for Bob Bender Productions. Co-producer for the show is Vinny Rivas. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.